Today, Powell will face the Senate Banking Committee, and joining us now is the lead Republican on that committee, South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. Senator, always good to see you. Always good to have you on.
Thank you.
That sounds reasonable. I don't know what you think, but data dependent.
Absolutely.
If we're too restrictive right now and we get a chance to bring rates down, lower rates are always better for economic growth. If inflation's under control, I think you can't. It's hard to disagree with what Chairman Powell said.
Well, there's no doubt. The key for us, however, is to make sure that what he's making is an economic decision and not a political decision in the year 2024 when presidential elections happen. So from my perspective, the most important consideration we should have should not be politics, and it should be economics. You look at our economy, inflation was up slightly more than expected last month. I would suggest that an interest rate cut is good for the American people. Millennials today cannot afford a home. Home ownership is struggling because it's been 40 years since it's been this expensive to own a home. Interest rate cuts make that a lot easier. 30 years since it's been this hard to put food on the table. Interest rate cuts, it factors in throughout the entire economy. So I hope that we have good news, but I want that news to be delivered because we're looking at economic data and not political realities.
Senator, I don't know if there's ever been a president that didn't like lower interest rates.
I don't think so.
But the guy you've been standing behind, I see on all those shots with former President Trump, and I know you've endorsed him. Do you and like I said, all presidents want lower rates. But do you remember the way he used to, as a real estate guy? Do you remember the way he used to talk about interest rates and Jay Powell? Do you remember that? So you're actually saying that you don't want President Biden forcing Jay Powell's hand. President Trump was all over poor Jay Powell constantly about lower. Do you remember that? It wasn't that long ago.
I remember of course, I think you're right. Every president likes lower interest rates. But this president, the question is, does he deserve lower interest rates? Because lower interest rates are not for presidents. They're for the American people. They're for the strength of our economy. And so the question we should ask ourselves is in 2018, 2019, when inflation was at 2% and we had the lowest unemployment rates for African Americans, for Hispanics, for Asians, a 70-year low for women, was the economy strong? Absolutely. Could we sustain the low rates because we had low interest rates? I think the answer is yes. The question today is, with inflation questionable, when do you cut rates? I hope he cuts rates because our economy deserves that kind of stimulus in the economy. Economic activity is good for America's future. We should all embrace that concept. My point is still the same, however. We want economic decisions, not political decisions, especially in a year of a presidential election. I'd also go a little further and say that this morning you'll hear us talk about the importance of inflation, regulation, and immigration and its impacts on our economy. We have to be clear. Immigration, illegal immigration, is having a disastrous impact on our economy. Regulation, Basel III, we heard really positive comments yesterday. We will follow up on those comments today. Basel III sidelines more capital, makes it more difficult for entrepreneurs to start their businesses and for having cash to get your first home. So everything that we can do to have a responsible level of regulations as opposed to an oppressive level of regulations, i.e. Basel III, it will be important to America's economy.
You're going to probably you're going to hear probably firsthand the president, and you've seen, I guess, what's going to be contained, a lot of the substance of the State of the Union message. I'm wondering what Republicans think about that. I mean, normally you'd say, oh, higher taxes, populism, corporate jets, all the same old. But I'm not sure. We were talking to someone from the Biden administration. That's like doubling down on a lot of policies that most Americans don't think have really helped them, according to some recent polls. So maybe they're playing right into Republicans' hands on this, Senator.
Well, it's bad for America. The Bidenomics devastated of the American economy, devastated the average person working. If you're working paycheck to paycheck, as I said a few seconds ago, it has not been this hard to put food on the table in 30 years. 60% of Americans do not have $1,000 in their savings for an emergency. People working paycheck to paycheck, they don't want to hear how good the economy is because they're trying to figure out where, because they're not going to restaurants. They're trying to strap together enough cash to put food on the table and gas in the car, still 30–40% higher than it was just 4 years ago. So what I hope that President Biden starts tonight is an apology tour, apologizing for Bidenomics. It has devastated average Americans, apologizing for the chaos and the crime in our streets, apologizing for the open border that has led to deaths untold throughout this country, and 70,000 Americans died because of fentanyl. There are things that we can do. There are things that he can do specifically to reduce illegal immigration, to strengthen our economy, and to push back on the regulatory environment that has become oppressive.
Senator, are you, he's a presumptive nominee now, I guess, President Trump. Is there, or former President Trump, is there a presumptive VP nominee? Do you know yet? Do you have any insight there that you can share with us?
I have no inside information, but I certainly hope he picks a vice president who will be strong on our border, good for our economy, who understands the inner workings of our government, and frankly, who puts the American people above American politics.
That sounds like, you mean like Tim Scott?
Well, that's funny. You know, sometimes I'm speechless. This is amazing on TV.
Okay.